try and keep an eye on the time here. Thank you. So this has always been my favourite photograph of the former Bank of Ireland headquarters in Baggot Street. Partly because I think it was taken towards the end of the 70s, just after the completion of the third four-storey block. But as you know, the buildings were designed in the 60s, and when you look at the cars and the people, even the hairstyles in this, they're straight out of central casting circa 1972. I think it really sort of expresses the period of the age and the project. But when we came to do the refurbishment of this building, the building was already listed. And what was listed was the superbly crafted bronze facade and the public square, the spaces in between. And time is very short, so I was going to focus really just on the technicalities of upgrading the facade to meet the thermal performance required, but I would like to just spend a minute or two talking about the ambition and the challenge of the project. So the challenge that was set to us by the client was not to look at this as a refurbishment project, but to look at it as a redevelopment. And the challenge was to redevelop the offices to be as good as, if not better than, any grade A offices that might be being built around this country and around the city at that time. So to do that, we had to meet all of the current building regulations, which we met at the time, but also we needed to adapt the building to suit more modern office requirements. And for me, this is the real challenge in terms of how to successfully redevelop our mid-century modern buildings to meet today's lifestyles and needs while retaining the essential character of the development and their cultural value. So to do that, we made two big moves on the project. So all architects here, so Baggot Street's on the left, cross-section to the site, James's Place East on the right. So the first big move we made was to add one full structural bay onto the rear of the largest block, 6.5 metres wide, 80 metres long. And that gave us about 50,000 square foot of pure net lettable, which was obviously very welcome and very useful. And that turned essentially a 3-bay building into a 4-bay building, but by moving the facade, literally moving the existing facade out by 1 bay and remaking the ends, it looks like it was always there. And I think, as Lance Wright said in the AR in 1971, that because of the modularity and the design of the building, it could be infinitely extendable. The other thing we did was to completely reconfigure the servicing strategy. The buildings were designed to be serviced with a central plant, all housed in the basement of the podium level underneath the building. It was an all-air handling system, and that provided all of the heating and cooling pumped through all 3 of the buildings. Very inefficient. I've described it as a kind of a 1970s gas guzzler car or similar to that nature. So we stripped all of that out and made each building function independently in terms of plant, using the spaces on the roof. And that gave us another 1,000 square metres of space, which we were able to convert into tenant facilities. And that was not basement space, it was good quality space because it was accessible from St. James's Place, and we were able to get some natural light in there. So those 2 big moves meant that in terms of the office space, with the extension of the floor plate, we were able to deliver I suppose, big, flexible, open floor plates that were much more suited to modern ways of working, and superb tenant facilities. The third thing, obviously, we had to do was to upgrade the cores, which we were able to do mostly within the footprints of the cores in the 2 smaller buildings. But on the larger building, because of the increased size and the increased population, we had to really reconfigure the cores. And that gave us an opportunity, particularly at ground floor level, to reconfigure them to move the lift core and out of its position and open up the ground floor to have a much more generous lobby and to bring some functions down there. There's a staff restaurant and a town hall space, and to turn that into a very active ground floor space. So in terms of facades, a little reminder of what it looked like back around 2000 and 2010. Obviously the bronze, not very well maintained, and attempts to clean it or homogenize the greening, not very successful. And the double glazing units breaking down, which was a safety issue because it's all annealed glass. But the big problem, obviously, was the thermal performance. We measured, on the bronze framing inside the building, we measured 60 degrees on the window frames in the height of summer. So obviously something had to be done about that. So how do you do that? So drawing on the left is the plan section of the system as it was designed. Obviously, beautifully worked out, impeccably detailed, absolute best quality materials available on the day, even double glazing, 1 inch thick. But as you can see, in terms of the thermal bridging, like almost impossible, and hardly a smidgen of insulation, apart from some asbestos in the spandrel panels, which obviously had to come out. So the solution was on the right. So obviously we kept the main bronze frame, external frame, and the external stiffener, upgraded the glazing to more modern double glazing. But the big decision was internally, we weren't able to reuse the original bronze beads, and we opted for bronze anodized aluminium, extruded aluminium sections. And the reason for that was really the only way to get in all of the different gaskets and seals, thermal breaks that we needed in order to upgrade the facade. And that meant that we could insulate the mullion, get in our membranes and tuck them into all those neat little grooves and things you can get in aluminium sections. And we redesigned the facade to perform in the same way that you might expect a high-performance modern curtain wall system to perform, fully thermally broken, and with a 2-stage waterproofing barrier and drained cavity right through the system. So even that wasn't enough to get us there in terms of Part L. We also had to add in an operable blind inside. So there's a Venetian blind that's linked to a building management system, linked to a weather station on the roof, and that actually descends and tracks the sun in kind of 3 clicks movements as the sun moves around during the day. We even had to paint the top of the blades bright white in order to get the reflective level we needed to bounce the heat back out. But we painted the underside of them bronze so that when they were closed from inside, you could still have that nice bronze effect. Even that didn't get us there in terms of the entirety of the facade, because with those glass-to-glass corners, if you want to put a meeting room or an office on the corner, you still don't pass Part L because of the overheating element. So we took the decision not to leave anything behind, and on those corners, on the south corners, just those 2 corner bays, we installed a secondary layer of glazing so that those corners operate pretty much the same as a twin wall system, and we just cut slots in the bronze to ventilate that cavity, and that finally got us there. So everything had to come off, everything was cleaned, all the asbestos cleaned off, metalworks all sandblasted, that's the original colour of the architectural brasswork, repatinated, reglazed, and everything done under factory conditions. The interesting thing was that we and even the building contractor was very nervous about taking, even though it was a modular system, about taking those windows off and then putting them back and then maybe not fitting right, because they've been sitting there shifting around for about 30 years. So we barcoded every one, and we treated it like you might treat a facade of a classical stone building. So every window that came off went back right in its original place. So the whole system then kind of went back on the building almost like a unitized facade, and I think we managed to keep 100% of the aesthetic of the facade by doing that. The next challenge was the ground floor glazing, which posed its own challenges, particularly the ones at the podium level. So as you can see, the drawing on the right is how they're constructed, and actually that rolled hollow section was really problematic. It was all rotted at the base, and the engineers wanted to actually just replace them. But fortunately, there was an imperial measurement, and you can see how snugly the bronze caps fit on it. So we couldn't get a metric section that would work, so we actually had to go back and refurbish the hollow sections in order to make them work, which is an interesting piece of modern conservation. And then we put it back using the same system with the anodized aluminium sections to get all of those gaskets and seals and thermal breaks. The only change we really made to the external appearance of the building is for the ground floor glazing, that we actually put it back upside down, because it was the other way around. With that mullion you see was lower down. I think the reason for that was because it lined up with the maximum height. You could get that you could get doors at the time. So obviously now you can get nice full height glazed drums, and so we just put it back upside down and put in a larger drum to give that ground floor an extra little bit of a lift, which is a bit more in proportion with the surrounding building. So I suppose it was the upgrading of the facade that really was the key driver in upgrading the thermal and environmental performance of the whole building, including the insulating the roofs, and that with a whole bunch of other things brought us to a LEED Platinum rating. Now, the LEED Platinum rating, I know it's only a method of measurement, but it was kind of useful to track what we were doing, and also when you look around and you see how few new buildings are actually being built to that standard, to deliver a refurbishment of a protected structure to that standard was some achievement. So I leave it with that just to say that when we were doing the LEED assessment, we got the US Green Building Council very involved, and they were particularly interested in supporting us in that project because there's obviously they have a whole bunch of buildings of that style in the United States, and the Green Building Council don't know what to do with them because they're listed and they're performing really appallingly environmentally. So they kind of followed that very interestingly as a test case project. That's it. Thank you.